10 Creepiest Unsolved Mysteries with Surveillance Footage. In the past, there was no visual evidence when a crime took place, but the invention of surveillance cameras has changed all that. However, surveillance footage sometimes raises more questions than it answers. Even in those cases, it may provide an eerie chronicle of the last moments of a person's life, before that person becomes the victim of a baffling, unsolved mystery. 1. The murder of Matt Flores. At first, the Christmas cards from their son's old boss arrived year after year at the Morrow home, always remembering the promising young engineer, gunned down in broad daylight at Applied Materials. Then, eventually, the cards stopped. So, too, did the calls from police. What hasn't stopped are the restless nights, lying awake, tormented with the same piercing questions about a murder that happened 15 years ago today. Who would have wanted Matthew D. Flores dead? Why would anyone want to kill the handsome, charismatic husband and father, a decorated Army veteran who led a seemingly ordinary life? It's been 15 years, it is still an unsolved homicide and nothing has ever come about, said Mike Morrow, Flores' stepfather. We're still hoping someday, someone will call us and say, here's what happened and here's the reason. But the mystery surrounding the case still haunts them, as they wait in frustration for Santa Clara police to find their son's shooter, a phantom-like killer who slipped away without a trace, from the parking lot of Building 12 on March 24, 1994. What made the Flores case all the more baffling was that even though it happened just minutes after 8 a.m. as he arrived to work on his 9th day on the job, it appears that no one saw the shooting. Not the woman who heard the shot and turned to see his kneeling body, slumped next to the driver's door of his sedan. Nor the other drivers who entered the parking lot just before he was shot once in the back of the head at point-blank range. None of the security cameras captured the shooting, and there was no shell casing from a weapon or sign of a struggle. None of his belongings were taken. But there was one potentially explosive piece of evidence caught on a grainy security videotape, a black and white Ford Explorer, seen circling the parking lot before the shooting, then leaving only seconds after Flores was shot. The driver has never been found. The most puzzling thing about this case is that it was so busy that morning, yet we didn't have as many witnesses as you would think there would be, said Captain Stuart Casimano, who's been at the department for 29 years. That's what was really lacking here. Flores, 26, had just left the Army where he had served as a lieutenant during Operation Desert Storm. He had moved his wife and 8-month-old daughter, Danielle, to Santa Clara for a job at Applied Materials where he was to train for a few months before transferring to the company's Dallas office. He had paid his dues and put himself through college, said his mother, Ellen Morrow, from her home in Rhode Island, where Flores grew up. This was his big chance and he never got to enjoy it. In the 15 years since Flores' death, Morrow hounded the FBI, congressional leaders and former U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno for help in her son's case. She even sought out psychics. Nothing panned out. I spent more than 5 years going everywhere, and anywhere to anyone who I thought could help, she said, and all I would get were doors slammed in my face or letters saying, "We can't help you." His widow, Denise, a nurse who lives in Massachusetts, never remarried, and both she and Danielle always wonder why Flores' life was taken so brutally. "We lived very ordinary lives," she said. "There have been so many days and nights when I've thought of every possible scenario and nothing makes sense." Danielle knows her father only through videos and photographs, including one near the Golden Gate Bridge taken days before his death, where he's holding her in his arms. Flores' case has appeared on Unsolved Mysteries, airing periodically over the years and occasionally generating new leads. "We've probably spent more time on this case than any other case that I can recall," Casimano said. More recently, Santa Clara police had consultants look at the case, submitted new evidence to the lab, and reviewed the surveillance tape. Detectives also took a new look at his military connections, exploring his relationships and assignments. Flores had no known enemies, so there's a question whether it could have been a case of mistaken identity. "There are no facts that can substantiate a theory," Casimano said. The family, however, remains frustrated with police. Casimano said he understands. "I don't blame them. I'm frustrated. This is one of those cases that I have always taken a personal interest in." At Applied Materials, The executives who knew Flores are gone. His old boss, Gary Robertson, who found him in the parking lot that day, no longer wants to talk about the case. And, since Flores had been at the tech company just days, not many knew him. Still, a reminder of him lingers at the company's sprawling campus. There, near the dull-forbidding concrete building 12 on Oakland Village Drive, is a scarcely noticeable barren tree planted in Flores' honor. Next to it lies a tombstone-like granite monument ensconced in a cluster of rocks with a plaque. It says simply, Matthew D. Flores, 1967 to 1994. No one has ever uncovered the full truth behind Matt Flores' murder, which was essentially the perfect crime. 2. The disappearance of Trevor Deely. The Gardaí Serious Crime Review team have opened a new cold case investigation into the disappearance of Trevor Deely, who went missing after attending a Christmas party on the 8th of December 16 years ago. After enjoying his office party at Buck Whaley's nightclub on Dublin's Leeson Street, the then 22-year-old Trevor Deely set off for his home on Serpentine Avenue but never arrived. The Nos man, who would now be 38 years of age, briefly returned to his workplace, at Bank of Ireland beside Leeson Street Bridge, to check his email and collect a golf umbrella as it was a rainy night and there was a taxi strike in Dublin. He was last spotted on CCTV footage captured at 4:14 am on December 8, which showed him crossing Bagot Street Bridge, and walking towards Haddington Road, Dublin 4 area. He was wearing a yellow and brown shirt and beige cord trousers. It wasn't until the following Monday morning, when Trevor didn't turn up for work, that concerns were raised, and a massive missing persons campaign was started by his family, friends and work colleagues. A massive search included house-to-house inquiries, and an extensive search of the Grand Canal, but nothing was found. 16 years on his whereabouts remains a mystery, but his safe return is anticipated by his family, who have dedicated their lives to finding Trevor since the year 2000. Yesterday, 7th of December, not only marked the night of Trevor's disappearance, but also Ireland's Missing Persons Day. The day commemorates those who have been reported missing, and recognizes the ongoing suffering for their families and friends. It also serves to raise public awareness of open or unsolved missing persons cases, and provides a platform to highlight the support services that are available to people who have lost a loved one. Trevor's heartbroken parents, Michael and Ann Deely, attended the 4th National Missing Persons Day ceremony at Family House in Dublin's Phoenix Park, yesterday to commemorate their son and other missing Irish people. Michael Deely told his local newspaper Kildare Now, that he has renewed hope as the CCTV footage capturing the last known images of Trevor has now been sent for specialist forensic analysis in the UK. I've been calling for more resources to be given to the Gardaí, for years to help them solve Trevor's case, and all missing people's cases, and so I'm delighted that Trevor's case is being looked into again. There's a team of 5 or 6 Gardaí that have been appointed to reinvestigate Trevor's case, and I met up with them a couple of weeks ago. There's no body or no scene for them to go on, but at the moment they're prioritizing the CCTV footage of him, and that's been taken over to an expert team in the UK, where they have more advanced methods of examining the footage than they do here in Ireland. I'm very pleased that there will be some fresh eyes looking into this, and it's certainly given me and my family a big boost to me and my family. I don't want to raise my hopes up too much at this stage, but at the same time I feel far more hopeful than I have in years. He added, "It's still our belief that Trevor is alive, and I'll carry on believing that unless it is proved otherwise." 6 years ago, to mark the 10th anniversary of Trevor's disappearance, investigating Gardaí released an age-progressed photograph of how Trevor could look in his early 30s. Despite a high-profile campaign to locate him, Trevor Deely has never been found. 3. The murder of Jane Rimmer. A dreadful cloud of fear settled over the city of Perth, when 3 young women were killed, one by one, and despite the passage of 20 years, it has never quite lifted. The Claremont murders are some of Australia's most enduring cold case files, and now reports suggest a man has been arrested in connection with them, some 20 years later. Regardless of this latest development, these killings changed Perth forever. G.R. Glennon, age 27, Jane Rimmer, 23, and Sarah Spires, 18, disappeared from Claremont in 1996 and 1997. The bodies of Chiara and Jane were later found, but Sarah's body has never been recovered. What made it so frightening is that it happened in a safe suburb. It happened to girls who could have been anybody's daughter, sister or best friend. The murders changed people's social habits and it made people feel unsafe. As young women, we were told not to go out in pairs, only go out in a group of at least 3. Do not catch a taxi. Do not hitchhike. Women were scared to go to pubs and nightclubs. The fear was quite palpable. And what made it even worse is that nearly 20 years later the killer hadn't been caught. How it could be that even with CCTV cameras and DNA, a killer had seemingly gotten away with the crime of snuffing out the lives of 3 beautiful young women. All 3 girls had been socializing in the nice, safe suburb of affluent Claremont. Yet the killer found a way to kidnap them, kill them and leave 2 of their bodies in bushland, without a trace of evidence. It was like the killer vanished into thin air. Along with the body of victim Sarah Spires, which is yet to be found. There are few West Australians who don't immediately recognize the girls' faces, which have been plastered on posters and across newspapers and TV reports for the last 20 years. The phrase Claremont serial killer was a constant on everybody's lips. Even today, many in Perth who had been teenagers at the time the girls went missing have a story to tell. Urban myths are stones that still gather moss, no matter how many years have rolled past. Even this journalist, who hails from Perth, has a connection. My friend's boyfriend had dated one of the victims. And the father of my family friend had worked with the victim's father. She told of the unspeakable horror of the girl's parents, when police broke the news that their beloved daughter's body had been discovered. My friends and I had walked home from the Claremont pub many times. Sometimes we would stupidly hitchhike. But never again. Task Force Macro, Australia's longest-running murder investigation, has investigated more than 3,000 people over the years. That's why a breakthrough, for the people of Perth, is a long time coming. Journalist Roz Thomas was working as a reporter for the 7 networks Today Tonight at the time of the killings, and she was invited to spend a night with Task Force Macro. All of a sudden, one of the cops turned to me and said, "You'd be the killer's perfect victim. You're a size 12, fair-haired and curvy," Thomas told the Huffington Post Australia. Another journalist told me, when I repeated what Thomas had said, that's something only a Perth cop would say. It was a strange night following the task force around at night. They'd sit in cars, waiting outside the Claremont pub, and making sure any women leaving would be safely getting in cars with friends. But most people stayed well away from Claremont. And, of course nobody dared to catch a taxi, Thomas said. The first suspect in the killings was a taxi driver. That's because Jane, Chiara and Sarah had told friends they were catching a taxi home. The phrase, "don't get a taxi," was thrown at anybody going out for a drink in the affluent western suburbs. We all had our theories. There was a well-known local politician I interviewed on an unrelated story, and he had an employee who was a taxi driver. There were stories going around about the politician's possible connection with the crimes. One theory is that the politician used the taxi driver to get his victims, then he could have his way with them, Thomas told the Huffington Post Australia. That's another thing the cops told me. That most serial killers practice a lot before they get their perfect murder, and there were a string of crimes that had similarities to the Claremont killings. Then the killer got good at what he was doing, and that the 3 Claremont murders were finally his perfect murders. On a personal note, the photograph the police used of Jane Rimmer showed her in a dress that was identical to a dress I'd recently worn to a friend's wedding. That always freaked me out, that Jane and I had the same dress, and that dress was all over the news. Also there was so many stories swirling around Perth, stories that a man was driving around Claremont with an axe, masking tape and black plastic. Stories that a 13-year-old girl, who was murdered years ago was his first victim. As recently as 2008, police released previously unseen CCTV footage, showing Jane Rimmer exchanging a greeting with an unidentified man outside the Continental Hotel in Claremont at midnight on June 9, the night she disappeared. The hotel had closed for the night and a man approaches Jane. She seems to acknowledge him. Then he walks out of view while Jane remains on the footpath for several minutes. When the rotating camera moves away from Jane, then returns, she is gone. For now, the people of Perth are desperately waiting for closure. And, of course, the family of Sarah Spires, will be living in hope that they might finally be able to bury their beloved daughter. 4. The murder of Nurin Jazlin. It began with an innocent visit to the night market. On the evening of August 20, 2007, 8-year-old Nurin Jazlin asked her mother for permission to run down to the neighborhood's night market. She wanted to buy hair grips for herself. Her mother, Nurin, was entertaining a guest at that time. She said okay, thinking that Nurin was going to be accompanied by her younger sister. Her daughters usually go out either in a buddy system or in groups. It never occurred to her that Nurin had decided to venture out by herself. Nurin slipped out and made her way towards the night market, located approximately 100 meters away from the family flat. The family lived in Wangsimaju, one of Kuala Lumpur's largest townships. It is known to be a busy area, day or night, even busier with the hustle and bustle of the weekly night market that takes place every Monday evening. Who would have thought that a century ago, a vast rubber estate once stood here? Since the township was formed in 1984, Wangsimaju has transformed itself over the years, from a quiet rural area, and finally developed into one of Kuala Lumpur's characteristic bustling urban quarters. Population has doubled over the years. The night market scene where Nurin was headed to was far from idyllic. Night markets, synonymous with Malaysian culture, are usually very busy and very popular, with Malaysians to shop for their fresh vegetables, fruits and meat as an alternative to supermarkets. Youths enjoy taking a stroll through night markets, sampling a wide variety of drinks and goodies sold there. Yet, despite the bustling atmosphere of the night market, the shoppers failed to notice anything out of the ordinary. The only witness to the abduction was another little girl, who had innocently assumed that Nurin was being taken home by someone she knew, perhaps a relative. Meanwhile, back at home, Nurin's parents grew frantic when they realized their little girl had not returned. The night was getting late. Father, Jazlin Abd Jalil, who worked as a cab driver, knew immediately that something was wrong. He went out to search for his missing daughter without success, despite help from concerned relatives and neighbors. The traders at the night market had not seen her since her last purchase, and could offer no clue. They were familiar with her as the Jazlin family were regular customers. The exhausted Jazlin finally trudged over to the local police station to lodge a report about his missing daughter. It was already 3 a.m. in the morning, approximately 7 hours since the abduction had taken place. The kidnapper had a head start. In Malaysia, the standard procedure for a missing persons report is the standard 24 hours wait. That is for missing adults. However, it is uncertain if the wait applies to missing children as well. If it is, then it is an issue that needs to be addressed immediately to prevent dire consequences. Parents need to know how soon they should approach the police for help. At present, there is an increasing public pressure for an immediate alert response to take place when a child goes missing. According to a recent report, precisely 6,240 missing children and teenagers have been reported since January 2004. Only 67% of them have returned safely. There have been 34 cases of children below the age of 9 filed missing between January and July this year. 17 of them have been recovered. Half of them are runaways. A number of them are parental kidnappings, common in messy divorces or separations. But a stranger abduction case is the most alarming. While it is not a common occurrence, representing only half of the smaller percentage of missing children cases per year, it is usually the more likely to be fatal. Most of the missing children are female. There have been too many cases of these victims being sexually assaulted of late. In 2004, a 10-year-old girl, Harawati, was raped and murdered in Kota Kinabalu, Sabah. Not 2 weeks later, Nurul Huda Abdulghani, also 10, was raped and murdered in Johor. It was reported that not long ago, around July 2007, 2 girls aged 5 and 6 respectively were abducted and molested in the Kampung Baru area in separate events, not too far from Wangsimaju. In the event of a stranger abduction, the very first 24 hours is the most crucial. When a child goes missing, the next 24 hours is highly critical. The odds of a child's survival greatly decreases every hour. In the United States of America, studies have estimated that 74% of children who are kidnapped and later found murdered are killed within the first 3 hours after being taken. In Nurin's case, it was most likely a crime of opportunity. It was not because her parents were consciously negligent. It was just pure bad luck that Nurin chose to brave that very night out alone for the first time, unaware that a predator was on the hunt for a potential victim close by. Her disappearance made its way into the local newspapers. It hardly made headlines on the front page news. A week later, her mother, Nurin, tearfully appealed to the press for the first time for help locating her missing daughter. By now, the police officially classified the case as kidnapping. The very next day, the little eyewitness stepped forward with her information. She had seen Nurin being persuaded by an unknown man to follow him, before being dragged and bundled into his white van. She even overheard Nurin saying no repeatedly to the perpetrator. The case finally heated up. A large-scale search operation was organized to locate the missing girl in the areas of Wangzimaju, Sanchul, Kapong, Jinjiang and Setapak. About 300 people, ranging from police officers, RILA members, City Hall personnel and Rukuntetanga, the neighborhood watch, volunteered. Their search turned up nothing. Nurin's parents were in despair. Her disappearance was not the only thing that was worrying, it was the state of her health that they were concerned with as well. Nurin suffered from kidney problems and high blood pressure. The missing child required daily medical attention. She needed to return home. By now, the snapshot of the smiling Nurin Jazlin published nationwide to help aid the search has become a very familiar image with Malaysians. Her case finally became news priority and was highly publicized by then. Pamphlets with Nurin's descriptions were distributed to the public, including foreigners, urging them to keep a lookout for her. Sensitive members of the public rang up the parents to offer their sympathies. There were also crank callers that hurled abuses and harsh criticisms towards them through text messages and phone calls, accusing them of being poor parents. Some were in the form of sick and tasteless pranks. Despite all these, Nurin's parents continued to will themselves to remain strong. They waited patiently for any news regarding their beloved child. The Inspector General of Police, Tan Sri Musa Hassan, continued to appeal to the public for any assistance and useful information. The police were running out of leads. Rewards for information were offered and increased nearly every week. Unfortunately, this case offered no happy ending. The pleas of her parents for Nurin's safe return went unheeded. No one else stepped forward offering any information. There was a tip-off from a female caller that insisted she had spotted Nurin near Seremban, but it was dismissed as false information. On September 17, a company supervisor in Petaling Jaya stumbled across a large Diodore sports bag outside the company premises, when she came to open the store. It was Monday morning. She initially thought the bag belonged to her employer, who had just returned from a trip. But when the general manager of the company arrived 30 minutes later, it was discovered that the bag did not belong to him. Upon opening the bag to search for identification or clues to the owner, to his horror, he found a body within. He immediately alerted the police. What followed next was a series of media circus. The body in the bag was a female child, aged between 6 and 8. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Reports confirmed that she died approximately 6 hours prior to being transported to the dump site. Nurin's parents were alerted immediately. They rushed to the Kuala Lumpur hospital for the identification procedure, barely able to brace themselves for the impending nightmare. Due to severe physical changes on the body caused by trauma, the husband and wife were unable to recognize her. They did not think it was Nurin. The body was initially presumed to be of a foreign child. But the subsequent DNA testing proved that the body in the morgue was indeed their child. By 8 o'clock on Thursday, the story made headlines on the evening news on TV. What was worse, the media blatantly accused the parents of refusing to accept the DNA test results. It was a great shock for Jazlin and his wife when the news came on. They were not informed of any forensics testing results, yet there it was, already announced nationwide. Due to misleading reports, there were public speculations that he was orchestrating a conspiracy to cover up his daughter's death. Later, they met up with the police again to find out about the DNA test and affirm it. The grieving couple could hardly believe it. The body was indeed their daughter. The DNA result was damning. What made it even worse was they failed to prioritize the parents with the results. Due to gross oversight, the media learned the results beforehand. The damage was done. The following Friday morning found the couple again in the national ice storm. Jazlin and his family returned to the hospital to claim their daughter's remains for burial. Waiting for them was a large crowd of people and the press, hungry for the unfolding drama. The public's eye continued to follow them, from the funeral prayers to the burial rituals of the late Nurin Jazlin. "We've tried," Jazlin said to his wife as they tearfully bid their final farewells to their daughter. Nurin's death sparked a nationwide outrage. Horrified parents shared the sentiments, horror and sympathy. A large number of Malaysians blogged on the internet to express their feelings of anger and disappointment over Nurin's ill-fated demise. Suspects were detained but dismissed when the police could not establish any solid links between them and the victim. Potential witnesses were questioned, but they were unable to volunteer any useful leads. The local authorities sought help from America's well-known law enforcement agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, FBI, to help enhance and examine a CCTV footage they had recovered from the premises of the store where Nurin's body was found. Malaysian police are not well equipped with modern digital forensics techniques. They were hopeful that footage may contain vital information about the perp that dumped the body. In America, any kidnapping case is automatically considered a federal crime, and will be handled by the FBI immediately. The FBI has a long vast experience in handling child abduction cases in America, starting with the fatal Lindbergh baby kidnapping in 1932, to the infamous slaying of Amber Hagerman. Amber Hagerman's demise, whose abduction and subsequent sexual assault co-murder in 1996, inspired the Amber Alert emergency broadcasting system as an immediate countermeasure to child abductors and predators in the event of stranger abductions. Currently, there is an ongoing online campaign by bloggers to introduce such procedure in Malaysia as well, aptly named Nurin Alert, also an acronym for Nationwide Urgent Response Information Network. The legislation for Nurin Alert is still pending for proposal and assessment. In the meantime, Nurin's parents had to deal with one blow after another. It was announced that they may be charged with parental negligence. Nurin's abduction and death somehow was their fault. Nurin's post-mortem photos were leaked to the public via email circulations by an irresponsible party. However, recent development has confirmed that the person responsible for the leakage is already in custody. Public outcry for injustice continues. There are several critical points to be examined from the Nurin tragedy. By far, it is the most controversial missing child case in Malaysia in recent years. The efficiency of local police work, media ethics, political and public sensitivity is indeed questionable. The media obviously lacked sensitivity when they over-sensationalized the case. News reports of the murder described every minute detail of Nurin's mutilations. However, the point that begs reflection is, how and why did the media obtain knowledge the DNA result before Nurin's parents did? It was sheer irresponsibility of both the authorities and the media. Then there are debates regarding the police work. Did they take too long to start mobilizing themselves to investigate Nurin's disappearance? While it is understood that the majority of the missing children are runaways, perhaps this case could offer a valid cause for them to reassess on how they could respond to future missing children cases in the event of a stranger abduction. With the Nurin Alert campaign going on, it is hopeful that this could change the outlook of police work regarding missing children. However, the blame should not lie entirely with the police force. The public needs to be educated as well on how to respond when a child goes missing, because every precious minute counts during an abduction case. Investigations will be more productive when the public and the police are able to work together. The controversial charge of Nurin's parents for parental negligence was another shocking headline. Under the Child Protection Act, parental negligence is an offense. However, due to the circumstances that this was a stranger abduction case, it is still an ongoing debate regarding the matter and the rationality behind it, and whether it is fair to charge Jazlin and wife for negligence. The general consensus is that these parties have failed Jazlin and his family during the unfolding of the traumatic events. Police work slowed down due to much unneeded public interferences, media sensationalism and political play-by-play. The added annoyance of the photo leaks did not help the investigations at all. There is a demand for proper studies and research in missing children and missing person cases, sex crimes and pedophilia in Malaysia. There is also an increased pressure for sex offenders lists to be made accessible to the public. A nationwide awareness certainly needs to be increased in order to understand sex crimes and why they occur. The myths and common perceptions that the victims and their families are to be blamed in these events are disturbing and have gone on for far too long. The appalling prank calls that Jazlin's family received during the investigations very much exposed how Malaysians need to understand about the reality of things. The common perception that murder and kidnapping happen regularly, the self-righteous nuance that the parents have sinned, and the political insinuation that Nurin's case is just media's diversion tactic are also a sad reflection of a thriving negative and shallow mentality that should be done away with. In fact, the Nurin case should serve as a wake-up call on how much the society has changed, and how much we need to change ourselves to deal with the issues at hand. It was announced recently that the government will invest billions of ringgit to modernize police equipment. While this is welcoming news, the focal point should also be emphasized more on police professionalism and incidents response alert. They may also need to re-examine their relationship with the media regarding details concerning an ongoing investigation and post-mortem reports. Parents should also be notified with guidelines on what to do in the event of a child abduction. Most parents are in dilemma about the 24 hours wait, and this issue needs to be addressed immediately. Every second is crucial in ensuring a child's odds of survival. A parent should be encouraged that it is alright to approach the police immediately when a child goes missing, without fearing accusations of overreaction. However, this matter still needs to be assessed carefully, as a lot of things need to be taken into consideration, such the state of urgency and if the child is genuinely missing, to avoid unnecessary panic. An awareness campaign could help address the issue. Recent developments suggest that there are possible connections between Nurin's case and the notorious Kampung Baru molester, who lured, kidnapped and molested the two little girls under the pretext of helping him search for his missing cat in July. This is not an uncommon tactic for a child molester when preying on their victims. As of now, the molester is yet to be caught and questioned. When they, the police, find him, "I want to look into his eyes," Jazlin said. "I want to look at the face of the man who killed my daughter. I want to see what kind of person he is." At present, Nurin's murder remains an open investigation. The police are convinced that they will find a lead. It's just a matter of time, good old police work and patience. Jazlin, his wife and his family and relatives are still hopeful that the police will apprehend the person responsible. They are hoping that justice will prevail. They pray for it. 5. The disappearance of Stephen Koecher. Stephen Koecher was a 30-year-old from St. George, Utah who went missing in Henderson, Nevada on December 12, 2009. The circumstances around his disappearance are unique. Stephen is a devout churchgoer, clean-cut and never been on the wrong side of the law. He isn't the type of person you would expect to go missing, but when he embarks upon a seemingly random road trip to Nevada, all bets are off. At the time Stephen went missing, he was faced with some financial worries. He was unemployed and behind in his rent. He occasionally passed out flyers for a Utah window washing company, which seemed to be his only income at the time. However, despite his money problems, Stephen by all accounts seemed in good spirits. His spontaneous trip from Utah to Nevada was puzzling, though. Items were purchased for Christmas while on the road, and he hoped to visit a female friend along the way, only to discover she wasn't home. Instead he spent time briefly with the family. He continued his trip, conversing with people on his cell phone, but giving no reason as to why he was around the Las Vegas area. Why he headed there specifically remains a mystery. Stephen's car was found parked in a dead-end cul-de-sac in Henderson. It was a quiet housing development for older people, many 55 years or older retired. The Koecher family was contacted in regards to the abandoned car and, to them, something was definitely not right. Stephen was officially reported as missing shortly thereafter. Found in his car was all of his belongings, except for his phone, wallet and keys. Surveillance video from a homeowner managed to capture Stephen's white Chevrolet Cavalier passing by as it was parked at the end of the street. Shortly after, the camera shows two angles of what appears to be Stephen walking past the house, at almost exactly 12 p.m. on December 12. He appears to be carrying a folder or some item. After he walks out of view of the camera, he never returns to the car and isn't ever seen alive again. This mysterious case was featured on the show Disappeared, as well as speculated endlessly by sites such as Reddit. As of 2015, Stephen Koecher is still missing. So what may have happened? With all missing persons, we can easily speculate as to what happened. But in this case, there are many things to first consider. Stephen was not in great financial shape, so traveling for work is very possible. He kept in touch with others, so besides the unexplained nature of the trip, nothing seemed wrong or unusual based on his demeanor. The trip itself was quite random in terms of direction, based on cell phone pings and debit card transactions. I think only Stephen himself truly knew the destination. No one has elaborated as to why he actually did this. Searches of his laptop and apartment yielded no clues either. So we really have no idea. What we do know is very little. Cell phone and computer records reveal nothing to why he stopped and parked at this particular housing development. But his car was there and he did likely walk past a home security camera about noon. Obviously, this raises some questions. His cell phone was telling as well. Call logs don't seem to be out of the ordinary, everything seems to be accounted for. However, the cell phone pings reveal some activity after Stephen disappeared. The phone shows movement from the south, where Stephen parked his car, to the northeast, where it pinged off a few towers along the way. Voicemail was checked in the early morning of December 13th. The phone stayed in the general area of Russell Road in Henderson until the signal was lost. The big question here is, was Stephen still with the phone? We don't necessarily know if this travel is indicative of Stephen and the phone, or just the phone. So ultimately, we have a 30-year-old guy, with a very clean background, despite some money issues, who ends up in a random area. Parks his car. Walks away. Poof, gone. Lots of speculation that this was a shady Craigslist type job interview, that went horribly wrong. I don't necessarily agree with that. Here's why. The complete lack of an electronic trail as to why he was in the Vegas area is baffling, but certainly if a job offer was on the table there would be a call or two, I would imagine. Also, who arranges a meeting and has a potential job prospect park in any place other than the driveway? Surely anyone with common sense would see a huge red flag from some internet job offer then asks to park on the street, and walk to a specified residence, on a Sunday no less. I just don't see that angle. Based on his parking in a secluded dead-end area of the street, and the complete lack of correspondence regarding a job meeting, I think Henderson may have just been a random stop on a fairly aimless trip of business and pleasure. To someone distributing flyers, it was a pretty idyllic area to drum up business, older retired folks in a quaint community who might be willing to pay for window washing services. We have no idea if Stephen passed out other flyers along the way, so this could have been his first stop or one of many. There was probably a bigger motive to the trip, but we will never know. We do know he had flyers in his car, so it might have been intended to occasionally stop, and pass a few out. We know he never walked back past that camera again, and certainly didn't go back to his car. So whatever the circumstances are that led to him vanishing, it was sparked by someone or something in that development. Now, in communities like that people tend to be attentive. Neighbors peer outside windows, people work in their yards, walk their dogs etc. To me, it's very strange that no one noticed a young man walking in the area. So either this is the first retirement community in the world, without nosy neighbors, or Stephen quickly entered a house or car. I'll go with the latter. What I'm thinking here is perhaps Stephen decided to speak to people he saw in community, instead of just placing a bunch of flyers indoors. It's more personal, and a smiling face is a lot more effective than simply a piece of paper stuffed in a door. Perhaps the first person he saw invited him inside and it all went downhill from there. Whatever it was, he surely didn't spend a lot of time walking, thus the lack of neighbor sightings. In the episode of Disappeared, one neighbor did express suspicion to police regarding another resident. So even in a development of largely 55-plus-year-olds, there are likely to be some shady characters despite the age bracket. Not to mention residents with shady relatives, handymen, house sitters etc. In the end, I think Stephen Koecher was lured into a stranger's house shortly after he parked his car. Desperate for money, he was likely excited by the prospect of a new client. The conversation then likely turned into a lucrative job assignment with a quick payment promised. This may have entailed something with the drug trade. Whoever is responsible probably spoke to Stephen in length, got to know him and quickly realized he had no ties to the area, needed money, was possibly naive and far from home. The possibility of him ending up in a drug deal gone badly is possible, but one way or the other I think he left the community in another car, and eventually realized he had gotten himself into a bad situation, but by then it was too late. And no one understands why Stephen parked his vehicle in this upscale neighborhood, which seemed like an unlikely place for him to become the victim of a violent crime. His cell phone signal was picked up at various locations by a tower several miles away, but the signal died after 2 days. With his employment and financial difficulties, some people have speculated that Stephen may have staged his disappearance to start a new life. However, there has been no trace of him for nearly 8 years. 6. The disappearance of Pamela Butler. On February 12, 2009, 47-year-old Pamela Butler called her mother from her home in Washington, D.C., and said that her boyfriend, Jose Rodriguez Cruz, was planning to take her out to dinner on Valentine's Day. Sometime during the next few days, Pamela vanished without explanation. When Pamela's family searched her home, she was nowhere to be found. Even though both of Pamela's vehicles were left behind, her keys, purse, and credit cards were gone. Strangely, some bed sheets were also missing from the house. Pamela was always concerned about her personal safety, and had equipped her home with a high-tech security system, with surveillance cameras at nearly every exit. However, an examination of the surveillance footage only raised more perplexing questions. The last footage of Pamela showed her walking outside of her house to get the mail on February 12, but there is no sign of her leaving afterward. The following day, Jose Rodriguez Cruz is shown arriving at Pamela's house, where he claimed that Pamela suddenly broke up with him without explanation and kicked him out. Throughout the next 3 days, the surveillance footage showed Jose entering and exiting the home on numerous occasions. Jose claimed that he was picking up his personal belongings, and that Pamela was not there during this time period, but no footage exists of Pamela exiting the house. The only exit point which wasn't covered by a surveillance camera was a trio of first floor windows, and one of them was found unlocked. In spite of some suspicions about Jose's story, there were no signs of foul play in the home or any evidence that a crime had been committed. Pamela Butler's disappearance remains a baffling mystery. 8 years have now gone by since Pamela Butler vanished from her Northwest D.C. home under suspicious circumstances. Her body has never been found and there has been no arrest. Now, the family of the government computer specialist is on the verge of declaring her legally dead. Derek Butler will tell you that within days of his sister's disappearance in February 2009, he knew in his heart his sister was dead. He said Pamela would never have vanished on her own. Although some in her family have held out hope that she was still alive, they have come to the conclusion she is gone and will never come home. But that is not all. Derek believes someone killed his sister, and he wants to know why. 7 years have gone by since he arrived at his sister's house on 4th Street, and found an unsettling and deeply troubling scene. The doors were locked, the alarm was off and the house was a mess. It was not nearly the way Pamela usually had kept it. "I never thought that Pam would just walk away," said Derek. "I always felt like it was foul play there. And here's why. Pam Butler had a sophisticated surveillance system installed in her house, and after she went missing, the family went through every minute of it. She was seen on tape entering the house 2 days before Valentine's Day and was never seen leaving. All we ever saw was the UPS man coming to her house to deliver things. The mailman would come and her ex-boyfriend," said Derek. "Nobody else ever came up to her front door or even around the house. Nobody else ever came into the yard other than those 3 people." The surveillance system showed Pam's ex-boyfriend coming and going from the house at odd hours and for several days. It seemed very suspicious because he constantly kept coming and going, said her brother. About 3 months after Pam disappeared, Derek Butler took us inside the house and showed us something the family found odd. "We came in, this blind was raised up," he described. "She would never pick the blinds up. She would lower them, from the top down so you couldn't see inside the house. It is also the only side of the house that was not under video surveillance." Derek suspects that is how his sister's body was carried out of the house. At the time of her disappearance, Fox 5 spoke more than once with her ex-boyfriend, who told us he had no idea what had happened to her. He said they had broken up and he was only removing his belongings from the house. Police questioned him several times, but he was never charged. With no arrests 7 years later, the family still wants answers. But they also wants to move on. "We are at a point right now where we haven't heard from Pam in 7 years, said Derek. "We really feel like she is not with us, so we are at the point right now where we are going to declare her dead shortly after the prayer vigil." Her house on 4th Street has been sold, looking little like it did 7 years ago. On Saturday afternoon, the Butlers will join family and friends in front of the house where they will remember a woman who would have been 54 years old. After her family declares her legally dead, they will hold a church memorial service. It is something they have never done. 7. The disappearance of Dale Kerstetter. Saturday, September 12, 1987, began as a typical work day for Dale Kerstetter. The 50-year-old security guard and maintenance man had worked for 27 years at the Corning Glassworks plant in Bradford, Pennsylvania. At 11 p.m., Kerstetter began his shift as a weekend security guard. That night, $250,000 worth of platinum pipe vanished from the plant, and Dale Kerstetter was never seen again. Pound for pound, platinum is one of the most precious commodities in the world. After Dale Kerstetter disappeared, authorities were mystified. Was Kerstetter the unwitting victim of a robbery, or had he engineered the heist himself? By all accounts, Dale was an ordinary man, who was loved by his family and respected by his employer. His son, Al, remembered him as being very compassionate. "He's just a great father. I mean, there wasn't a kid in the world that wouldn't want to have him as their dad." On Sunday morning, September 13th, security guard John Lindquist arrived at 7 o'clock a.m. He expected to find Dale waiting to be relieved. He usually sat right inside the door and he wasn't there. So I walked in the cafeteria and I see his lunch pail sitting on the table. I happened to pick up the newspaper and there were the keys. So then I looked in his lunch pail, and I see that everything was there. He hadn't eaten. Later that morning, Dale's pickup truck was discovered in the plant parking lot. Police were called in to investigate. The truck yielded a number of clues that suggested Dale had not disappeared voluntarily. His keys were still in the ignition, and he left behind a full carton of cigarettes, an empty gun holster from his .22 caliber pistol, and his day pack. That afternoon, the sheriff's canine unit was brought in to track Dale's movements in the 112,000 square foot factory. The dogs led police to the second floor. This was the site of the plant's glass furnace, also known as the tank. The tank contained the valuable platinum pipe but was not part of Dale's normal security rounds. Even though Dale's scent was found near the tank, he was nowhere in the building. The investigation next focused on the 3 security cameras that monitor the factory around the clock. Personnel manager, Patrick Foley, was disturbed by what the cameras had recorded. "The first thing I saw was a masked man in the back of the plant in the one area. When I saw the masked man on the tape, I was very alarmed. At first I thought, there's been some foul play, Dale's involved in foul play, and he probably is missing. And then Dale Kerstetter came back and met this masked person in the back of the plant. I had a very empty feeling in my stomach. I said, what on earth? And then, as I continued to review the tapes, I saw the masked person come back out, and go up to the tank area. Then I was extremely anxious, because at that time I realized that not only do we have a missing employee, there was a good possibility that we had missing platinum in the plant. Whoever removed the platinum from the tank was extremely familiar with the plant. Everything in the plant, they knew exactly where to go. Police could not tell if Dale was being coerced or if he was part of the heist. At one point he looked directly into the camera. Was Dale signaling for help? Or was he coolly flaunting his crime? Patrick Foley was sure he knew the answer. I think the fact that he did everything in front of the cameras was once again just Dale Kerstetter saying to us, look, hey, here I am. I'm taking your platinum and there isn't a thing you can do about it. However, Wendy Kerstetter believed her father was an innocent victim. According to her theory, Dale Herdor saw the masked intruder and went to investigate. If he had planned on taking off anywhere, why would he bother packing a lunch? I mean, just little things like that. and a whole carton of cigarettes, and he smoked all the time. I mean, he would have taken his cigarettes. Another theory places Dale at the center of a bold and premeditated robbery. Inspector Max J. Bizak of the Pennsylvania State Police was one of the lead investigators on the case. Through our investigation, we determined Dale Kerstetter was approximately $30,000 to $40,000 in arrears on various payments, trailer payments, vehicle payments and different bills which he had owed throughout the area. Whether Dale Kerstetter committed the crime or not, his daughter Wendy and the rest of his family are anxious to know if he is still alive. He had 6 kids, 2 grandkids. And to do something like that and take off, and not call any of them, just take off and never talk to your kids again? I just can't believe it. Dale Kerstetter is 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighs 130 pounds. He has blue eyes, brown and gray hair and a receding hairline. However, Dale's family never believed that he was involved, and suspected that he was an innocent murder victim. Indeed, the surveillance footage also showed the masked intruder wheeling a large bag out of the plant, which could have contained Dale's body. Whatever the truth, Dale Kerstetter has not been seen in nearly 30 years. 8. The disappearance of Jesse Ross. In November 2006, Jesse Ross, 20, a sophomore in college, traveled to Chicago with a group of 13 of his fellow University of Missouri-Kansas City college students, and their faculty sponsor. The group was in town to attend a Model United Nations convention held at the Sheraton Chicago Hotel and Towers. The conference drew more than 1,000 college students from around the country. On November 20th, Jesse called his mother, Donna, to say that he was having a blast at the conference, and that he would call her the next day, when he and the group were headed back home. The next night, November 21st, the last night of the conference, a dance was held at the hotel. Jesse was spotted on a surveillance photo just before 1 a.m. He was then seen again at about 2:30 a.m. by friend Ralph Parker. He and Parker were taking part in a simulated emergency UN meeting with 30 other students when Jesse left the conference room through a side door. A surveillance camera in the hotel lobby caught the unmistakable image of the red-haired Jesse, clad in a white t-shirt, jeans, and a green warm-up jacket, walking toward the main doors. He was carrying a Gatorade bottle. Parker assumed Jesse had either gone to the restroom, or headed back to their hotel to sleep. The hotel was at the Four Points Sheraton at 630 North Rush Street, about 10 minutes away, but Jesse never arrived. No one has seen him since. When the meeting concluded at about 5:30 a.m., Parker walked back to the hotel room alone. He turned on the hall light so he wouldn't disturb his roommate. There was a big mess on the bed, and he's so skinny, I figured he was under the mess somewhere, Parker says of Jesse. But when he woke up at 10 a.m., he realized Jesse had never returned. No reason to panic, he probably just crashed in someone else's room, Parker thought. So I just packed up his stuff thinking he should be thanking me, he says. It wasn't until about 3 p.m., 12 hours after Jesse had last been seen, that Parker and the other UMKC students on the trip realized there was a real emergency. Since Jesse Ross was reported missing, police divers and cadaver dogs have searched along the Chicago River, near the Sheraton Chicago Hotel and Towers. Police have also searched the area around both hotels, the Sheraton Chicago Hotel and Towers, where Jesse was last seen, and the Four Points Sheraton, where he was staying. They have not turned up any leads. Chicago police have found no evidence that he was a victim of foul play. There has been no activity on Jesse's credit cards or his cell phone, neither of which have been found. GPS tracking could not be used on Jesse's cell phone, because it is either turned off or the battery is dead. On a website dedicated to her son, Donald Ross has expressed her frustration. When you lose someone you love when they pass on, you grieve and then you move on with your life, Donald said. We are nowhere. We are still stuck in that revolving door. We know nothing more than we knew that first day. Jesse Ross's father said, we are constantly looking for these types of items, hoping the police will bring in actionable help to resolve some of these mysteries, hopefully Jesse's, but we pray for answers for all those who wait and wonder. 9. The disappearance of Marianne Fowler. In 2000, Jerry Fowler, the elections commissioner for the state of Louisiana, made the news when he received a 5-year sentence in a Texas federal prison for bribery. 2 years later, his 65-year-old wife, Marianne Fowler, made headlines for different reasons. On Christmas Eve in 2002, Marianne was on her way from Louisiana to Texas to visit her incarcerated husband, when she stopped at a Subway sandwich shop at a strip mall in Port Allen. Shortly after purchasing some food, Marianne disappeared. Her vehicle was left behind with wrapped Christmas presents inside, and her food, purse, and keys were scattered in the parking lot. Some false fingernails were also found on the ground, which likely came off when Marianne struggled with an attacker. Investigators checked footage from a nearby surveillance camera. Although it was hard to see anything at first, the FBI eventually enhanced the footage enough to make out the image of Marianne being forced into a Chevy pickup truck, before it sped out of the strip mall parking lot. Unfortunately, the footage was not clear enough to provide an adequate shot of the assailant. The most likely suspect is Derek Todd Lee, the notorious Baton Rouge serial killer, who is currently on death row for the murders of at least 7 women. Lee owned a pickup truck similar to the one seen in the surveillance footage, and cell phone records placed him in Port Allen on the day of the abduction. However, there has never been enough evidence to conclusively link him with Marianne Fowler's disappearance. In the end, all West Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff Mike Cases was seeking, from Baton Rouge serial killer Derek Todd Lee was the location of Marianne Fowler's body. But that wish was dashed Thursday morning, when Lee died from natural causes at an area hospital. For years, Cases investigators had Lee as their prime suspect in Fowler's disappearance, and apparent abduction from a Port Allen area shopping mall on Law 415 around 5:30 p.m. Christmas Eve 2002. But they never felt they had enough evidence to bring a case to prosecution. Cases and his investigators said Friday they had collected some tantalizing bits of evidence pointing to Lee, but, in retrospect, nothing definitive that could prove a case in court. The fact that Gros State and St. Gabriel cell towers hit on Lee's cell phone in the general location of Fowler's disappearance the night she was abducted, a fake nail found at the scene of the abduction that turned up no DNA, the pickup truck Lee once owned that seemed, possibly, to match one visible in surveillance video from the night of Fowler's abduction, though the truck also had no DNA from Lee, or, the fact that Lee sold a maroon Chevrolet pickup just days after sheriff's investigators disclosed in the media that they were looking for that kind of pickup in Fowler's case. "We had a circumstantial case, at best," Brian Doucette, sheriff's chief of detectives, said Friday. Fowler, 65, was the wife of now-deceased Elections Commissioner Jerry Fowler. Her apparent abduction came during the height of fear over the then-unknown serial killer at work and string of brutal murders of women in the Baton Rouge area. A special joint task force had already been formed and, one day before Fowler disappeared, authorities announced 4 slayings had been tied to the same DNA profile. A former career education advocate and a former state secretary of education, Fowler was on her way to visit her husband at a Beaumont, Texas, federal prison for the holidays the night she disappeared. Jerry Fowler, who died in 2009, had been serving a 5-year prison sentence in a bribery and kickback scheme involving voting machines. Sheriff's deputies searched for Marianne Fowler for 12 days after she disappeared, covering 500 miles. A court declared her legally dead in May 2004. Lee was arrested a year earlier in Atlanta, after he had been linked through DNA analysis to several slayings, though not Fowler's. Well after Lee was convicted in 2 of those murders and received the death penalty in one of them, the 2002 slaying of Charlotte Murray Pace, 22, in Baton Rouge, Cases said he would visit Lee as he waited on death row at Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola for a sentence that would never be executed. But even when Cases said he promised not to prosecute Lee for Fowler's murder if Lee would just say where her body was so the sheriff could bring some closure for Fowler's grandchildren, Lee not only would not relent but would also go into a tantrum. "He would just go nuts," Cases said. He would like snap when I asked him that." Lee, 47, of St. Francisville, was taken from Angola on January 16 for an undisclosed medical condition. State corrections officials have not released details about Lee's health problems, citing federal medical privacy laws. The East Baton Rouge Parish Coroner's Office conducted Lee's autopsy Friday morning on behalf of the West Feliciana Parish Coroner's Office. At this point in our investigation, with the collected evidence, it is our belief that Mr. Lee passed from natural causes, West Feliciana Coroner Dr. Chaley Daniel said in a statement Friday afternoon. We will continue to await final reports regarding post-mortem examination. Elizabeth Bourgeois, office manager for Daniel's medical practice, said the coroner told her it would likely take 2 to 3 weeks to get final pathology reports. While John Pritchett, the son of Marianne Fowler, has few kind words for former Baton Rouge Police Chief Pat Inglade over his early role in the serial killer investigation, Pritchett said he believes Cases and West Baton Rouge Sheriff's investigators did the best they could in his mother's abduction. But anger with Derek Todd Lee burns fiercely in Pritchett over what he believes led to his mother, him and his family. Thoughts of the suffering his mom may have endured at Lee's hands, memories of Pritchett's last irritated call with his mom on Christmas Eve because she was going to visit his stepfather, Jerry Fowler, and not visiting friends with him, and the constant reminder that Pritchett has no grave to visit his mother in death, all haunt the 56-year-old to this day. He said he harbors thoughts of wishing he had killed Lee himself, and welcomed his death Thursday. I could care less about him or his family or anybody else. I have no sympathy, nothing for him or his family, said Pritchett, who works as a plant operator and lives in Bresley. Pritchett said a friend said he was going to pray for him, so Pritchett could find forgiveness for Lee and the burden in his heart could leave him. I just don't see it happening, Pritchett said. Maybe I'm wrong for that. I got so much hate. I just don't see it happening. West Baton Rouge Sheriff's Captain Kevin Cyrus said the surveillance video that captured the apparent abduction was shot from inside a liquor and tobacco store 2 strip mall store locations away from the Subway restaurant Fowler had visited moments before she disappeared. Fowler's Mazda and what investigators think was Lee's pickup can be seen parked outside through the liquor store's windows. Though enhanced by the FBI, the VHS videotape shows, Cyrus said, some kind struggle of 2 people between the pickup and the Mazda after Fowler leaves the Subway. But Cyrus said it is hard to say if the figure is definitively Lee, or if the pickup in the video is his. At the scene, Cyrus said, detectives found Fowler's car, and her purse and items from it, including the fake nail, thrown about in an open parking space where the surveillance appeared to show a struggle. After Lee's arrest, detectives tracked Lee's former Chevy pickup to the current owner, and searched it for DNA but found nothing, Cyrus said. Cases said the owner worked in construction, and mortar and sand in the truck hindered any chance for DNA. We'd like to say we did bring justice for her. We did everything we could trying to get it, Cases said. Cyrus and Doucette explained that sheriff's investigators also made a calculation through the years. With Lee already convicted and facing the death penalty, it did not make sense to bring a prosecution that could fail, when they had what appeared to be time on their side. They held out, they said, that one day they might find a key link or even Fowler's body to tie Lee to her death. Cyrus added that even with Lee's death, he has no regrets over that strategy because he would have wanted Lee convicted on Fowler's death, and not on Lee's reputation from prior convictions. Cyrus and Doucette said the case against Lee is not closed. Land clearing for a new subdivision, high water in the swamp or hunters in the woods might one day find that conclusive link, Cyrus said. Until a body is found, no, it's still considered to me, in my professional opinion, an open case, he said. 10. The mysterious death of Alan Geel. On February 25, 2014, police investigating the case of a man found washed up on a beach naked, with a sock in his mouth, believe someone in Plymouth may be able to tell them what happened. Alan Geel's body was found on Prentworth Beach 3 months ago, and police have today released new information in the hope it will assist with the investigation. That includes the fact they believe Mr. Geel has a friend in Plymouth, who may be able to help with their investigation. Alan's body was found on Tuesday, February 25, with multiple injuries to his chest, head and hand. He suffered significant internal injuries, a flesh wound to his scalp and bleeding hand injuries. There were some signs of possible drowning, but it has not been confirmed as the cause of death. A set of headphones were found in Alan's mouth, as well as a rolled-up sock. The white Apple iPhone or iPod-style headphones, with volume control, were looped around the back of the sock and were trailing out of his mouth. The light blue raincoat he was seen wearing in Truro on Monday 24 February has not been found. The navy regatta jacket found on the beach is thought to be different to the one he was seen wearing in the CCTV images. Some of Alan's other belongings are still missing, including a Barclays Bank current account card, a Barclaycard credit card, a Nokia 1110i mobile phone, a third-generation iPod Shuffle, and the rest of the clothing he was wearing. Alan had recently purchased a 10 kilograms weighted training vest, and 2 kilograms ankle weights, but they have not been located. Detectives are trying to establish whether they were bought for him to wear or whether he bought them for another reason, such as a gift for someone else. Alan is believed to have got a bus from the Lemon Key, Truro to Pranporth at around 6:50 p.m. on Monday 24 February. CCTV footage shows him waiting with 3 other people at a bus stop, but these people have not been traced. Officers have taken advice from the Coast Guard about tides, currents, swell and weather conditions. One theory is that Alan may have entered the water towards Ponson's, however this has not been confirmed. DCI Dave Thorne, senior investigating officer, said, 3 months on and there are still some gaps in the information we have about Alan and his last movements. We are still treating his death as suspicious due to the extent of his injuries, and the fact that he was found naked, with a sock and headphones in his mouth. There are a number of people we are keen to trace, including 3 people seen with him at the bus stop in Truro who have not come forward yet. We believe he may have had a friend in Plymouth and another in Redruth, and would like to speak to them as they may be able to provide crucial information, and fill in some of the gaps. During the investigation we have discovered that Alan was into online gaming, and detectives would also like to hear from anyone who interacted with him online. There are lots of theories about how he may have died, but we don't know exactly what happened to him, and we want to provide Alan's family with some answers. Anyone with any information that could assist with the investigation is asked to contact police on 101 or Crime Stoppers, anonymously, on 0800 555 111, quoting reference 381 of 1 March. Linda Daniels, Alan's sister, has released the following tribute to Alan. Alan was a very fit man and in good health. He walked daily and would have been a great advert to the NHS as a man who looked after his heart. As a pensioner he lived well, as he required little of life's comforts to keep himself happy and amused. A roof over his head, a bed, hot water, a computer, the internet, some basic food and drink, and his favorite music of the moment seemed to be all that he needed. It is difficult to imagine anyone would have envied anything that he had, except possibly for a few special mineral exhibits which illustrated a previous passion in geology and mining. Alan was frequently a watcher and reflective thinker, and was not the sort of person people always noticed. He would have been the visible fly on the wall in the corner. He would have hoped, had he still been with us today, that other people were watching and listening where he was between 6:45 p.m. in Truro on Monday 24 February on the evening where the heavens opened, and 2 p.m. the next day when his body was found on Pranporth Beach, having met an untimely demise somehow and somewhere during this time. I was totally unprepared for his death and very shocked to hear about it. The fact that it is unexplained does not help me deal with the disbelief about what has happened. Clearly I never said goodbye or gave him a final treat of any kind. If something happened at the end, where he needed help and support, I was not there to help. I want to wake up and think it is all a nightmare but realize it is not and there is no happy ending. More than anything I want answers, realizing that there is nothing I can do to bring him back.